welcome to the Philadelphia Alliance for Capital and Technology's PACT Digital Forum. I'm your host, Michael Bachman, joined by co-host Peter Coffey, and we are here to talk about all things innovation around AI. Our guest today is Mike Gadsby, co-founder and chief innovation officer of O3. O3 is one of the greatest technology providers here in the area for all things user experience, innovation, as well as the new wave of artificial intelligence. Sponsoring technology conferences like O3.
Nice to be here and nice to be chatting with you both.
So, Mike, tell us a little bit about yourself and why our viewership needs to know who you are and who O3
Certainly
is.
Who O3 is. O3, we're digital experience consultants. So what that means is we work with our clients to understand friction and opportunity points, either within their customer experience or employee experience, really help to create digital solutions to solve those problems. These days, like everyone else, and I would say, but in our own unique and experience-centric way, we use AI to really solve those problems. Whether that's through personalization, whether that's through conversational solutions, prediction, or what we call next best action, or workflow automation. In all of those areas, AI is really taking center stage, and it's really helping to change the way that we work. And the manner with which we interact, not just with the digital space, but with one another.
You're also going to be at Phorum on April 22nd at the Comcast Innovation Center,
I will
aren't
be,
you?
and that'll be a lot of fun. I'm looking forward to it.
Well, we've got a lot of questions for you, and the audience is eager to hear what you have to say. I think, Peter, you and I were chomping at the bit to start getting some questions over to Mike, but I think you had a really good one.
Well, I know, Mike, that on at least one occasion recently, you've used the expression that we are at a pivotal moment for AI. You've used the expression, you've said big questions are on the table. What's the axis around which that pivot's taking place? Sure. Are you happy with the pace and direction of that pivot? Do you have concerns about the degree to which that is or is not moving in the right direction or being held back by various considerations?
It's a great question. So everything we do is human-centered, right? All of my perspectives are really built around how do we create bigger, better, more awesome experiences, right? Whether that's for people, customers interacting with brands, whether that's for patients interacting with, the healthcare system, whether that's employees just trying to get their work done, right? It still all centers around how do we make for the better and I would say the best human experience that we can, right? So we think about this pivotal moment that's happening. There's a lot of considerations that go into that. For me, it really centers around the change in dynamics of human behavior as it relates to how we interact with information, with knowledge, and then ultimately what that means for everything from how we do our jobs to how we do the most, common everyday tasks like, getting the groceries, right? I watch my wife, who's an avid Amazon user, when it comes to actually ordering our groceries weekly. And frankly, even with Amazon, it's a challenging experience. But I just saw recently, like Amazon, I guess reintroducing Alexa to the world and being able to sort of take action through Alexa with all our groceries. And I'm thinking about, well, what does that mean for her day? Right? What does that mean for, additional time and energy that we can spend doing other things? Right. So I think about that also on the workforce side. Right. And I think about okay, well, what does that mean for people whose primary jobs was data entry? Right? All of a sudden now we're in a world where everything's going to be flipped on its head. So there's just so many considerations that need to go into this and so much thinking that needs to happen outside of just, can I solve the problem? We have to think about what that problem really means and what that looks like for all of the people involved in that problem, right? Everything from, changing expectations about what jobs really mean to, really being thoughtful about, the implementation of a lot of these solutions.
Mike, if we were to make a 3-act play out of this, and there's a reason why most plays have 3 acts. I mean, if act 1 is, I've got a process, I'm going to write code that automates that process. We actually used the verb computerize a few decades ago, and the user interface will be the residue of whatever the code tells you it's got to be. And then act 2, we said we can do better than that. We can design a screen with buttons and menus and things, and then wire up behavior on the backside of that. But again, the first one you had to know the magic words to use at the command line. The second one, you're limited to the vocabulary of the buttons and the menus and things. And now we're in an Act 3 where you can ask a question that wasn't necessarily specifically planned to be answered by the application, and a generative type facility will say, oh, okay, I can do that for you. This is a whole different thing now where the stuff on the backside doesn't need to be planned and roadmapped with the kind of rigidity that it did, and where users now have a chance to ask questions that weren't anticipated by the system designers and still get a useful result.
Yep. I would argue there, design is more important than ever.
Yeah. Okay. No, there you go with that.
I'll say it this way, and only because we've done so much work now in AI, and we've done everything from your typical sort of conversational experiences right through these really intricate sort of workflow automation type experiences. And while generally I'll say this, like, we've been building user interfaces for a long time at this point. And we've thought, I've written curriculum on the proper way to build a search, right? And where search exists within the overall experience and the considerations that go into it. The reality, though, is those were never great ideas. Those were just the best ideas we had with the technologies available.
They were imposed on us by
the limits, right? I use a Google search as like a perfect example of this. You really think about a Google search. I go put my keywords in. I get 10 results. I'm going to go into the link. I'm going to go look at the page. Is that the right page? It's not the right page. I'm going to come out. There's a reason why they put those summaries now at the top. Because if all I have is a question, I just want an answer. I don't want to go look around for 15 pages to go get to the answer, right? So there's just a lot of that that's happening. But within a lot of that, to your point about like it not being so, point A to point Z, right? The reality is our ability now to dig in deeper, our ability to sort of ask a follow-up question and then dig a little deeper. The ability now, you think about agents and the ability for the AI to take an action, right? And all of that to start to happen. We need to be more thoughtful than ever about how to bring all of that together.
Well, let me jump back 3 sentences to where you said design's more important than ever, because I do hear a sentiment out there from some people, with pretty high level titles and pretty big companies saying, well, what this does is they're almost abdicating design. They're saying, oh yeah, that you won't need applications to do that anymore. You'll just ask the question of the data. I think that underestimates what I think you're talking about, which is the responsibility to guide and support good question asking instead of just letting people ask whatever question comes to mind.
I'll give you a perfect example. Sales conversations, right? How much do we train salespeople on product information? How much do we train them on the appropriate way to interact with potential prospects? How much do we give them information on where that prospect is within that buyer journey, and when and how and where do we start to have different types of conversations, right? Those are the same thoughts that need to go into creating these AI solutions to make them meaningful, right? Just because you have a knowledge base doesn't mean it's useful. Mike can do this better than I can, but at the end of the day, data's all over the place, right? I mean, it's so funny to me. We have clients that are like, wow, we got this repo of, 10,000 documents that we just want to, throw some AI at it, and people can ask all sorts of questions. Do you know how many versions of one file would probably exist on that? They probably had like proposal 9 of whatever, where like it's all of the same content with just slightly different variations. If you asked a human to go tell you, like, ask a question, and they pulled up 10 of these files and they had a different answer in each one of those files, how would you know which one is right? Right? At the end of the day, that's why the design of this is so important. Design of the data, design of how we interact with that data, design and thinking about the types of questions people might have, and then quantitatively looking at the questions people do ask and redesigning the manner with which we're going to be interacting with that information. So it's just
you're talking about getting a lot more, I guess some people would use the word semantics into the system, where if I ask a question that has, as you said, 10 answers over the last 10 months, I don't want a dumb PageRank type algorithm that says, well, the one that's 10 months old is the one that's been getting the most traffic, so I'll give you that one. No, the one that came up an hour ago, which has had no traffic yet, is actually the one I want to see.
More or less.
Yeah, and so this is So from that perspective, and this is where we're going to capitalize on this. This is the importance of metadata, right? So we have to know what version is the most up to date. What words have been redacted or not in the actual data itself. I mean, it almost seems like, I know at various attorney conferences that I've been at in the early aughts, they always talked about the importance of metadata for discovery, e-discovery, and legal discovery. Now it seems like metadata is actually sort of the data lingua franca of making AI useful and practical. How are you looking at metadata as opposed to data? Does that still play a role, or can AI somehow magically discern what's actually in the data, which is the most relevant, without having to have a whole stratum of or gradient of different types of metadata to go and I
think the short answer to that is, this is going to sound like just kind of silly, but yes. Like, all of that is important and all of that is necessary as we think about. Here's the way to think about, and especially because we just finished up a project, or like in the middle of a project where we're actually using AI to write the metadata for a document. Right? We're looking at the document and we're looking at the information in the document. There's pictures on the document. And we're having it look at the pictures and explain what that picture happens to be. And then applying that information back to the document itself so that we can create a better search experience. All right. But the thinking is long-term is, what if that doesn't exactly return what a person's really looking for? How can we then capture the intent of the user and then apply that back to the metadata, and then continuously kind of create the cycle of information that we're attaching to these objects, right? So this is why I go back to design is more important than ever. The thinking that goes into this. I mean, I think the idea that you're just going to sprinkle some AI on it and everything's going to magically, appear is crazy. Like there's so much work that goes into making sure that we're making the work as easy and as useful as possible for a lot of these models, that like how we think about not just the data itself, not just that metadata sort of example, but like the way in which people want to interact with that information is critical.
Yeah.
And then creating the feedback loops necessary to continually capture human intent in order to make the systems better. Because to me, it's the folks who are going to maximize that loop that ultimately are going to produce the best possible products, right?
Well, we let the word magic come into the conversation, so I feel obligated to do my three idea sequence here, which is that Arthur Clarke famously said that any sufficiently advanced technology becomes indistinguishable from magic. Barry Gimm said, well, the logical corollary is that any technology that is distinguishable from magic is insufficiently advanced. But Dr. Strange added, yeah, but you better get the whole book because the warnings come after the spells. And what I need to know is, what are the warnings that come after the spells that you want to make sure people, get those pages out of the book as well?
So we talk a lot about change management and the impact of a lot of these solutions as it relates to the day-to-day jobs to be done within an organization. I'll just focus on like the job space right now, right? I am very concerned that there is an emphasis on efficiency without the understanding that these technologies are fundamentally changing the way in which we interact with our day-to-day lives in such a meaningful way that you really have to be thoughtful about what that's going to look like every time you're implementing a solution. I mean, if you were completely ruthless, you could look at it and just say, oh, well, whatever, we're going to cut 30% of the workforce and then, hey, we're in good shape. But the problem with that thinking is that it doesn't think long term about the fact that you have human capital that you need to maximize in order to get the most fundamentally out of this technology. So to me, that's where the biggest pitfall is in all of this, is people turning back to the humans that this is all impacting and going, okay, well, we're either going to retrain you, we're going to rethink the jobs and the job structures that we have. We're going to think about how you're going to do your job better with way more efficiency and be able to produce at 10x what you were doing before because of this, right? All of those are huge considerations that I see there is a concern in the world, but I don't see enough solutions around that. And I think that's a lot of what we think about when we think about the work that we're doing is not just that can we solve the problem, but how do we solve the problem with people at the center of it.
Mike, if I told you that my takeaways from this conversation are, don't let the creation capability of a generative AI fool you. Design is more important than ever. Anticipation of what would be a good process for a person to go through is something that has to be added value to the data. And the only real measure of whether we're doing this right is the quality of human experience that results. Have I been listening?
I think you got it. I think you got it pretty nailed there, Peter.
Well, I think I got it from you, Mike, but I just want to make sure that I feel like that's really what we're hearing here. And thank you so much for sharing that perspective with us.
Appreciate it.
I have one final question that I think we ask all of our viewers want to know is where the gaps in the AI is today, in the AI ecosystem is today. And we're talking about keeping humans in the loop on a variety of different fronts, but where are some gaps that need to be shored up, and how do we do that practically? In a minute.
There are a lot of gaps. I mean, and I think the most of the gaps, speak back to kind of where I was a few minutes ago there, right? Like, I see the new models come out. I see the new tools come out with the various, Claude just dropped a new thing recently, and we looked at what was happening between search getting implemented and now research getting implemented into ChatGPT. Like, these are all really incredible tools. But I am very, very clear on the fact that, like, without a little bit of a driver's manual for these things, without a sense of like, how does this fit into my everyday life, I feel like that's a miss. And I'm totally interested in how people use this stuff creatively. I watch my kids use it, for school in crazy ways that I'm like, wow, this is super creative and interesting, and just because they figured out a few things. But I do think there needs to be a little more of a spotlight put on. Let's launch this thing. Let's think about how this actually fits in our lives, and let's be really deliberate about how we use them.
One bonus question, since you're all about user experience and human in the loop and everything, are keyboards going to be necessary going forward, or are we going to have another way to interface with apps and agents?
I think about this from the terms of like the organizations. Like, I love being in an office. I love being around people. I get a lot of energy around people, right? But I think about this question, and I thought about this question years ago when Alexa came out. And then when everyone was talking about, like, everything's going to be hands-free now, and I'm like, can you imagine if all you heard was people talking all day long in space and, like, talking to their machines? I'm like, that can't be a good thing, right? Like, that would be a very noisy workplace, right? So this is what I'm saying. Practically speaking, like, yes, on my own, in my own space, like, yeah, because I like to be moving around. And if I can do the Tony Stark thing and tell Jarvis to solve all my problems, and that's great. But Tony Stark works by himself, right? Like, we got to think about what does it mean to be, in a space with humans. It's a little bit different. So it's a good question. I think there's probably some hybrid between the two, right? And I think there's shortcuts, intent. I think AI really understanding because you took these 2 or 3 actions, like we do with like filling out the rest of the words, right, in a text message, right? Like, let's fill out all the 10 actions that we think you need to take now, and then maybe we click a button and that's that. So there's probably
Mike Bachman, if you take away my keyboard, you take away my ability to read an email and make several changes before I hit send.
Exactly.
And who knows what could result.
Fair enough. I think this is going to be a question that everybody is going to have on his, her, and their mind for a while. Let's see how it all unfolds. Soundproof booths for everybody in the office.
That's right. I love the question, though, I will say.
It's a lot of fun. That said, you're Mike Gadsby, you're Peter Coffey, I'm Mike Bachman. Join us at the Philadelphia PACT Forum on Tuesday, April 22nd at the Comcast Innovation Center. Digital Forum is part of the overall PACT Forum series of events where you will see folks like Mike and many others that we're going to be interviewing here leading up to the event and thereafter. So for our listeners, we do have a listener promo for PACT Forum, and you can find that listener promo on our website at philadelphiapact.com/forum. And the listener promo is TDP 2025. That's TDP 2025. We hope to see you there. And so do all of our guests, as well as Peter and myself. Thank you for your time, and thank you for listening.